Good afternoon. So today I'll be presenting on coral reef ecosystem. My name is Ndali Kawich. So let's begin. So an overview. So we'll be looking at the literature review. We'll be looking at the human impacts. We'll be looking at what is coral bleaching. We'll be looking at natural and anthropogenic impacts. We'll be concluding and we'll be looking at references. So the literature review introduction. It says, coral reefs are among the most biologically diverse and productive ecosystem in the world. Most many coastal communities depend upon these economically and culturally important ecosystem as a source of income or resources, said Van Dam et al. 2011. Belize is relatively sparsely populated with coral in our barrier reefs. Coral reefs are important for commercial, artisanal fishing and aquaculture, said Villa et al. 2002. So when it says that many coastal communities depend on these economically, culturally important ecosystems, it is just basically saying that the coral reefs are homes to many fishes, to many reef fishes to be specific. There are various types, and they're economically important and they're a resource of income because the local fishermen would go and fish there, catch their fishes so they can sell to make a living. And that's why it is said that it is very important economically wise and it is a source of income. So the continuation for the introduction is man-made stresses to coral reefs have exceeded their regenerative capacity, causing dramatic shift in species composition and resulting in severe economic loss. There has been a decline of coral reef due to owing primarily to overharvesting, pollution, disease, and climate change. Today, coral populations are further affected by increasingly prevalent coral diseases and climatically induced coral bleaching. So here what it says, it's that over the time there's been a lot of decrease of coral reefs due to overharvesting. This is overfishing, pollution. Pollution could be littering, sedimentation, um, being being brought into the oceans from inland, diseases like coral bleaching, climate change, increasing of temperature in our waters. So the first topic that we'll be looking is human impacts on coral reefs. So one of them is overfishing, pollution, deforestation, sedimentation, and coastal development. These are key drivers of reef decline, said Smith et al. 2006. So overfishing is when they basically overfish the reef fishes. Pollution, like I mentioned before, could be littering, um, the us disposing our chemical waste in the ocean, us adding other chemicals to the ocean, like the factories where that's how they would dispose of their chemicals and so forth. Deforestation causes sedimentation. Deforestation and coastal development both cause sedimentations being introduced into the waters, and what this causes is that the sediments then fall or they reach upon where the corals are and it blocks sunlight, which which doesn't allow for the chrysanthemums to be able to photosynthesize and make food and so forth. Here there's a picture on your right where you can, the picture is depict what is depicting is it's a fishing net. There's a fishing net that that was left on a coral colony. It was just left there. This could be because maybe the fishermen, when they released the net and when they were rolling it up or when they pull it up to check what they caught, um, they were unable to untangle it because it got tangled, it got stuck on this coral colony. And then so this caused for this coral colony to die due to this fishing gear being left here. Al-Jufali et al. 1999 said that the most common damage to corals result from fisheries activities, gill nets, rope, anchors, fishing line, fishing, fish traps, and litter. As I mentioned before, um, with referencing back to the picture, also another way that the corals are damages, as Al-Hufali said, is anchors. So anchors is like when these big cruise ships would reach the coast, they would typically throw their anchor, you know, to anchor them obviously. And then so then this is one of the ways that coral reefs are also being damaged or decreased. That's why the population of corals are being decreased. On many reefs, the combination of overfishing of herbivore fishes and added nutrients from land-based activities elevate coral mortality and recruitment failures, said Rogers and Miller's 2006. Here, there's a picture to elaborate more on that. What Rogers and Miller said is the threat to coral reefs when overfishing. As we can read here, it says coral reef fish are significant food source for over 1 billion of people worldwide. Many coastal and island communities depend on the coral reef fishes for their economic, social, and cultural benefits. It says, but too much of a good thing can be bad for corals, like um overfishing um at the fisheries nurseries. It is known that that juvenile fishes love to be in the coral reefs. That's where they feed, that's where they grow, that's where they sustain themselves. And also fishing spawning aggregations is that basically certain locations where large numbers of um, fish species would go to spawn, and then that's when they're more vulnerable to be overfished because there's a lot of them at one place at one time, at a certain time. And then also industrial fishing, such as the method called trawling, where they would throw this big net and then the boat would pull it. The boat would be on the surface and then it would pull it. And then the net at the bottom, the sea floor is just sweeping and catching everything, putting everything in the net. So then while that happens, a lot of corals are being taken and ripped off during that process. This is what big industrial companies do when they fish, and then whatever they catch that they don't see useful or that's the aim for the fishing wasn't for that specific thing that's found, like small crustaceans, they're living on the seafloor, fishes, corals, they would just throw them right back in and they would call it bycatch because it's not useful for them. So coral bleaching. What is coral bleaching? So basically, coral bleaching is, as seen here in the picture. Let's look at the picture first. Here on your left, you can see a very bright, full of color coral colony. This that you see here, this is a healthy living coral colony. And then here on your left side, it's the same colony, the exact same colony. Um, but as you can notice, the color has disappeared. This is what is called coral bleaching. And this picture was retrieved from a website, and this is what is actually happening in the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. So it says most reef building corals contain photosynthetic cells called zooxanthellates. Zooxanthellates are algae that live in their tissues. And then they have this symbiotic relationship between the coral and the zooxanthellate. So basically, the coral provides protection and a home to the zooxanthellate because the zooxanthellate is very vulnerable to be eaten by um, fishes that come and nibble it. So the coral, so they would live inside of the coral tissues. So the coral and the coral polyp is what gives it shelter and protection. And in exchange, what the zooxanthellae gives to the coral is food and energy and its color. That's what keeps it alive because the coral can only sustain itself with 10%. So the other 90% is um mostly given from the zooxanthellae to the coral. So then this is what keeps the coral alive. So coral bleaching is when the coral expels the zooxanthellae, which causes the coral to lose its color and eventually die. And the main factor for coral bleaching is temperature. The changes of temperature, the warmer the waters are. So the corals have an optimum temperature to live in where they are healthy, where they don't have any stress, is 23 to 29 degrees Celsius. That's their optimum temperature. So if the temperature goes above that, it means it's getting warmer, which we know is happening today because of climate change. And then that is what causes stress on the zooxanthellae, and then that's why the coral expels it because the zooxanthellae starts to produce a toxin that the coral that basically could damage the coral. So the response that the coral does is just expels it. Then, as said here by Hughes et al. 2003, global warming causes thermal stress, leading to bleaching and higher rates of mortality of corals. And then here is a picture to explain it more. As you can see here, this is a healthy coral, this is a bleached coral, and this is a dead coral. So this type of coral is Acropora. That's the genus of this coral. And then as you can see here, the zooxanthellae are in the coral tissues. See the little black dots here, the tissues. So this is a live, healthy coral. And as you can see here, water temperature increases. So between days to weeks, and with this factor here, the water temperature increases. The zooxanthellae are expelled from the tissues. As you can see here, they're being expelled, and the little black things are just out and floating around. They're freely, and then that's why the coral loses its color. Then that's why it says bleach coral. Then it says, if prolonged temperature stress, if the waters keep getting warmer and warmer, it keeps increasing, then the coral eventually dies. Because remember, the zooxanthellae provides with 90% of the energy. And then the coral just has 10% to sustain itself independently. But if water temperature returns to normal to its optimum temperatures, from a bleached coral, the zooxanthellae would re-enter the tissues and then it would become a healthy coral once more. Okay, so now let's look at natural and anthropogenic impacts affecting coral. Identify impacts on reefs are caused by natural events, such as storms, including waterfall floods carrying sediments, as mentioned before, how sediments affect corals, Predation by the crown of thorns sea star acanthostar. As you can see here in the picture, they like to feed on these corals. So as you can see here, this is a crown of thorn sea star feeding on a coral, coral disease, and human influences. Here, just a little note, it says an adult crown of thorn starfish can consume up to 10 meters square of coral a year. Okay, continuing, it says pollutants increase sedimentation through poor land use, eutrophication, and overfishing and overexpansion. There had been some patchy coral colonies which were believed to be caused by tourists that had stand on them when there is low tide. Also, wave exposure have also been recognized as a major factor influencing coral assembly composite. Okay, so here there's a little picture of the coral assemblage composition, which is the boulder. Here is a little lagoon, here's a little island thing. Then all of this is the pelagic soil. This is the open waters. And then here it says coral destruction 50 to 80% due to direct destruction by storm-induced wave, as it was mentioned here, that wave exposure. And then here the arrows, all they signify is the movement of the broken corals. So all of these corals that were destroyed here, they would fall down to the deepest depth. And then so this causes 100% of coral destruction. And see, there's just no. Okay, to conclude, current knowledge on the status of coral reefs, the human threats, and the sicknesses that are being faced on all coral reefs around the world, known as coral bleaching, the natural and the anthropogenic impacts affecting the coral reefs, brings an insight into what is happening, not to just in recent days and in our country, but all around the world where coral reefs are present. Brown, 1987, said, when comparing the outcomes of natural and man-made disturbances, the responses of reef to single natural stresses seem much more predictable and also more amenable to broad generalization than man-made disturbances. All Brown was trying to say here is that the response that reefs have to natural stresses seems to be more amenable, meaning that they can make a comeback to it rather than the responses that they have when it's man-made, when humans are the one impacted. So here are the references of everything that was used for this PowerPoint. And thank you very much for your attention. This is just basically a picture of the corals that I took picture of when I went diving. And yeah, thank you for your attention.